Steven Universe and all associated images are property of Cartoon Network, Rebecca Sugar, and any and all other respective owners. I don't know them all. All footage in this video has been used for the purpose of critique parody under fair use. Please support the official release. Guys, this is really it. It's really time. I am finally touching on the idea of where it is that gems actually come from. Not the physical place, but their origin as a species. There are some other great theories floating around out there, especially one very good video here on YouTube, trying to define what type of life form the gems are. However, the mistake that a lot of these theories tend to make is that they try to define the gems in really general terms, treating them like any other life form with built-in biological functions. And the fact is, they don't have any of those. They don't have appendages, they don't have circulatory or neurological systems, they don't have organs, they don't metabolize things to create energy, they don't have cells. They're literally just rocks. Rocks that have a built-in power source and store information, and have the capacity to project holograms, obviously. That's how we know that they're artificial intelligence. They are defined in canon more as technology than they are life forms. So you guys may be asking at this point, as many of you have asked many times, AJ, does this mean that you think that the gems could not have evolved naturally? And to that I say, yes and no. And don't worry, what I mean by that is a lot simpler than you may think. Basically, I don't think there has to be a distinction between the two. What if gems evolved naturally as more traditional organic beings, who, over time as their technology evolved, continued to enhance themselves until they had become, as a species, something closer to what we think of as gems today? See, the main issue with trying to determine the origin of gems is trying to explain why it is that their base form is humanoid. The humanoid form is far from the most efficient form that nature could possibly devise. There are countless more efficient forms here on Earth that have been produced by evolution here on Earth. And it is far from the most efficient design that science can possibly produce. And this first scenario, that gems started off as more traditional organic beings that just happen to be humanoid like we humans are, explains why they're humanoid. And it also solves the problem of the fact that the gems seem to operate autonomously. They don't seem to answer to anyone but themselves. Well, the diamonds don't, at least. There isn't some maker race that presides over them, controlling their actions and the direction of their society. Or if there is, they're so detached from gem society that we have seen literally no sign of them in the canon so far. That's the second main issue that I've come across when trying to define what it is that gems actually are. Trying to determine a scenario in which it makes sense that if the gems are artificial in nature, the creator race wouldn't in some way be present. If the gems are the creator race, if they did create themselves, so to speak, then this makes sense. However, I don't think this is the most likely scenario. I have a second possibility up for your guys' consideration, and that's the one that I want to focus the most on in this video. There is a concept in theoretical science called the self-replicating spacecraft or space probe, often nicknamed the von Neumann machine after physicist John von Neumann, who originated the concept. At its basest level, the von Neumann spacecraft would be an artificially intelligent probe sent out into space to explore or gather natural resources or to pave the way for society to then make the journey themselves. And it would have built into it a factory with which it could refine materials that it encountered out in space and use those materials to construct, part by part, new instances of itself, hence self-replicating. Looking at gems and how they branch out, colonizing new worlds and setting up kindergartens there to literally grow more of their kind is very reminiscent of the concept of the von Neumann spacecraft. But obviously it's not exactly the same. As I mentioned, the von Neumann spacecraft would literally have the ability to replicate itself built into its own body. Gems very simply don't, with a few exceptions that I'll talk about in just a moment. I mentioned back in my video attempting to prove that the gems were not always made to serve the diamonds and their specific agenda, that the main defense we have against technology becoming self-aware is that we can limit its construction to prevent that from happening. Something like the von Neumann spacecraft would be the exception to that rule. Theoretically, the artificial intelligence on a von Neumann spacecraft could be sophisticated enough to upgrade the design of the von Neumann spacecraft with each new manufacturing generation. The von Neumann spacecrafts, generation by generation, would become more powerful both in software and hardware, and could conceivably become autonomous, self-aware machines. They wouldn't start out that way. They were never built to be self-aware, but they could become self-aware over time. I think that the gems are something like this. I think that they were created by a race of humanoid aliens, first for use on the original homeworld of that race, made humanoid so that the people of that planet could better relate to them. but given the ability to change their shape at will so that they could be used for multiple different tasks. Eventually, as the society grew larger and larger, these machines were sent out into space to seek out new resource-rich planets that their society could draw upon. And along the way, they would use the resources on the planets that they discovered to construct more themselves. Each generation became more and more sophisticated until they reached the point of sentience. It's probably around that time that the diamonds were originally created. Now, alive in their own right, the gems would start to create a society of their own and govern themselves out in space, far from their original home. It's possible that no remaining gems even remember that they came from another home. They would continue on their mission seeking out new planets with the resources needed to construct their machines and to reproduce. But now, being self-aware, they would do so for their own benefit. They would continue to expand and reproduce even when they don't technically need to, because that's programmed into the core of their being. Each new gem comes out with a humanoid form, because that's programmed into the core of their being. After all, following this model, each new generation of gems would have used the same base software package, for lack of a better term. All of that default programming would still be there. The only real issues that I have with this version of the theory is that gems take a very long time to reproduce. Using lore details, the best guess we can come up with is about 500 years, though we did learn in beta that that process can be rushed, but that the results aren't always ideal. This doesn't really make sense for a von Neumann machine, as ideally a von Neumann machine or a group of von Neumann machines would be able to construct copies of themselves fast enough to branch out far enough to benefit the current generation of whatever society originally constructed them. So unless the original creators of the gems are incredibly long-lived, their long reproduction time just doesn't make sense. Though there are a couple ways to explain this. It's possible that as gems improved upon themselves over and over again, they became more and more complex, and it reached a point where it took longer and longer to create more. But now that gems have achieved sentience, have reached a sort of acceptable plateau of intelligence, generation to generation, they aren't any more complex than they used to be. We have also seen some gems which seem to have the ability to duplicate themselves temporarily, instantaneously. In fact, that's the benefit of gems over regular von Neumann machines, the fact that gems utilize holographic technology. I mentioned earlier that a gem can take on practically any form that it needs to suit the situation. A regular von Neumann machine, if it came across a scenario that it itself couldn't tackle, would have to construct a version of itself that could. Gems don't have that problem. And if they need numbers, certain types of gems, that being pearls, and whichever type of gem centipede eventually turns out to be, can create holographic duplicates of themselves, presumably allowing those duplicates to take on any form that the gem itself could take on. Solve whatever problem it is that they need to solve, and then move on. And just to cover my bases here, this also explains why it is that the originators of the gems, the originating alien race, seems to be a non-entity in the story, because either the gems have simply outlived them, or they have moved so far away from their original homeworld that they no longer have contact with those people. And that's pretty much it. I think that the most likely origin of gems is that there's some variation of the von Neumann machine. Admittedly, a lot of this is just speculation, as we know very little about the nature of gems, and even less about how gems actually function on Homeworld itself, and we know nothing of Homeworld history. But I think there are enough details in the show at this point for me to be fairly certain that this theory is at least in the correct ballpark. What do you guys think? Is this theory up to the task, or do you think it would do well with a few self-improvements? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. Either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later. Hey guys, I'm trying out a new outro today. You may have noticed recently that in these theory videos, my pre-recorded outro has been suspiciously absent. That's because I've needed to change it for a while, and I've been trying to decide how to go about doing that. I may make another pre-recorded outro at some point, but at least for the time being, I'm going to start recording an outro specific to each video. Now, the reason that I need to change my outro in the first place is because even though you can still go to my Tumblr page and send me asks about Steven Universe, about theories that you yourself are curious about, I am no longer using my Facebook for that. You guys may have noticed a while ago that I stopped answering messages on my Facebook. First of all, I get too many to keep up with. I'm just one guy. But second, and more importantly, despite the fact that I am literally nobody, my Facebook has been hacked not once, not twice, but 3 times. And even though Facebook has caught it and I have reset my password each of those times, I really don't like the idea of somebody eventually managing to get onto my Facebook and start sending messages to you guys as if they were me. Don't know that that would ever happen. I just don't like even thinking about it. There's also the issue that I just plain don't like Facebook. I will continue to post the new videos that I make on Facebook, so if you guys would rather follow my Facebook page than my YouTube channel to receive notifications when new videos go up, that's perfectly fine. That's not going to change. I'm just not accepting messages there anymore. But don't worry, I do have a plan in place that will allow at least some of you to not only send me messages regarding theories, but to interact a little more directly with me going forward. That's it for today, guys, and thank you for watching.